The Diary of Samuel Pepys, 9th of January 1660. For these 2 or 3 days I have been much troubled with thoughts how to get money to pay them that I have borrowed money of, by reason of my money being in my uncle's hands. I rose early this morning and looked over and corrected my brother John's speech, which he is to make the next apposition. And after that I went towards my office, and in my way met with Will Simmons, Muddyman, and Jack Price, and went with them to Harper's, and in many sorts of talk I stayed till 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I found Muddyman a good scholar, an arch rogue, and one that, though he writes news books for the Parliament, yet he did declare that he did it only to get money, and did talk very basely of many of them. Among other things, Will Simmons told me how his uncle Scobell was on Saturday last called to the bar for entering in the journal of the House for the year 1653 these words: "This day His Excellence the Lord General Cromwell dissolved this House," which words the Parliament voted a forgery and demanded of him how they came to be entered. He answered that they were his own handwriting, and that he did it by virtue of his office and the practice of his predecessors, and that the intent of the practice was to let posterity know how such and such a Parliament was dissolved, whether by the command of the King or by their own neglect, as the last House of Lords was, and that to this end he had said and writ that it was dissolved by His Excellence the Lord General, and that for the word dissolved he never at that time did hear of any other term, and desired pardon if he would not dare to make a word himself, which he was 6 years after, before they came themselves to call it an interruption. But they were so little satisfied with this answer, that they did choose a committee to report to the House whether this crime of Mr. Scobell's did come within the Act of Indemnity or no. Thence I went with Mr. Muddyman to the coffee house, and gave 18 pence to be entered of the club. Thence into the hall, where I heard for certain that Monk was coming to London, and that Bradshaw's lodgings were preparing for him. Thence to Mrs. Jem, and found her in bed, and some was afraid that it would prove the smallpox. Thence back to Westminster Hall, where I heard how Sir H. Vane was this day voted out of the House, and to sit no more there, and that he would retire himself to his house at Raby, as also all the rest of the 9 officers that had their commissions formerly taken away from them were commanded to their farthest houses from London during the pleasure of the Parliament. Here I met with quartermaster of my Lord's troop and his clerk, Mr. Jennings, and took them home and gave a bottle of wine and the remainder of my collar of brawn, and so good night. After that came in Mr. Hawley, who told me that I was missed this day at my office, and that tomorrow I must pay all the money that I have, at which I was put to great loss how I should get money to make up my cash, and so went to bed in great trouble. Appendix to the 9th of January. Pepys had borrowed money from his office on the 4th of January to pay his rent. That's what he was worried about paying back.